The Zalzar Dominion had conquered over 100 star systems, reducing civilizations to footnotes in history. To them, humanity was nothing more than another primitive species waiting to be subjugated. Their analysts deemed humans biologically fragile, technologically backward, and strategically inferior. The decision to invade was not debated but dismissed as inevitable. A mere formality, the invasion fleet arrived in the Sol system, gliding past the outer planets without resistance. Their warships were monolithic, obsidian hulls, energy shields capable of withstanding nuclear fire, and weapons that could split moons in half. They positioned themselves above Earth, calculating where to strike first. On the bridge of the flagship, Grand Marshal Viarun observed the blue-green world below. "This will be swift," he declared to his officers. "They will kneel before the Dominion or be erased." A signal was sent. The first wave began. The bombardment was precise. Orbital cannons targeted key military installations, leveling bases before human forces could respond. Entire city blocks turned to molten craters. Satellites were reduced to debris, severing global communications. Shock troops descended from the sky in drop pods, their armor glinting against the flames consuming the ground below. For the first few hours, it was chaos. Humanity's response was fragmented, uncoordinated. Governments struggled to reestablish control. Civilians were paralyzed with fear, watching the sky burn. The Zalzar war machine advanced without resistance. Then the resistance began. It was small at first, isolated groups of soldiers fighting from the rubble. Civilians, desperate and furious, arming themselves with whatever they could find. Entire cities refused to surrender, turning into fortresses of defiance. Zalzar commanders expected humanity to break. Instead, the humans adapted. They fought in ways that defied logic. Ambushes in the dead of night. Suicide bombers targeting supply lines. Homemade explosives crippling armored walkers. Civilians didn't just resist, they hunted. A single soldier with a stolen plasma rifle could eliminate an entire Zalzar squad before vanishing into the ruins. The first Zalzar officer captured was dragged into a makeshift bunker beneath a ruined city. His captors were bloodied, covered in soot, their uniforms tattered. They should have been broken. Instead, they were smiling. "You don't understand what you've done," one of them said. "You didn't just invade us. You pissed us off." At first, Zalzar High Command dismissed the growing reports of human resistance. The Dominion had conquered countless species before. None had lasted long. But Earth wasn't falling. If anything, the war was escalating. Cities that had been taken were now war zones. Supply lines were being ambushed daily. Zalzar forces stationed on the ground were losing more troops in a week than they had in entire planetary campaigns. The humans were fighting as if they had nothing to lose. The problem wasn't just their weapons. It was their minds. They adapted too quickly, learned too fast. A squadron of Zalzar shock troops deployed to pacify a small human outpost expected an easy operation. They had done this dozens of times before. Land, neutralize resistance, establish control. But this time, something was different. The moment they entered the ruins, the first soldier was taken out by a sniper. Then another. Then another. The squad tried to regroup, but the humans were already on them. Explosives detonated from below, collapsing the ground beneath their feet. Gunfire erupted from the shadows. By the time reinforcements arrived, the squad had been wiped out. Survivors spoke of something terrifying. Humans weren't just fighting back. They were hunting them. Zalzar generals, once dismissive, were now concerned. Reports showed human technology advancing at an alarming rate. Captured plasma weapons were now being used against their own troops. Aerial drones, crude but effective, were striking key command posts. An enemy that had been deemed primitive was now engaging in counteroffensives. A turning point came when a Zalzar dreadnought, positioned over North America, was taken down, not by another warship, but by a repurposed space shuttle loaded with explosives. The humans had sacrificed an entire crew to take it out. The message was clear. They would not stop. In the Dominion's history, conquest had always followed a pattern. Resistance was inevitable, but it was always brief. A few weeks at most. Earth had been under siege for months. Zalzar soldiers, once confident in their superiority, now feared the shadows. Every patrol was a risk. Every occupied city a battlefield. The Dominion had waged wars for centuries, but they had never encountered an enemy like this. An alien commander, surveying the growing disaster, finally voiced what none of them had dared to say. We underestimated them. The Zalzar Dominion had never lost a war. Their fleets stretched across the stars, their rule uncontested for centuries. When they turned their attention to Earth, they saw nothing but another insignificant species to crush. Their analysts predicted minimal resistance, humans lacked advanced weapons, had no interstellar presence, and were divided by politics and conflict. A conquest without challenge. A formality. Their warships darkened the sky, descending upon Earth with overwhelming force. Orbital strikes obliterated military installations in minutes. Communications collapsed as satellites were torn apart. Cities burned while Zalzar commanders watched from the safety of their flagships, already planning the division of Earth's resources. The first wave of troops landed expecting immediate surrender. They moved methodically, securing key locations, establishing outposts. But as they advanced, something felt off. Resistance was expected, but not like this. Humans didn't retreat in terror. They fought. First, it was chaotic. Isolated groups of soldiers and civilians forming pockets of defiance. Small skirmishes, ambushes in the ruins of fallen cities. Zalzar squads would enter buildings only to be met with gunfire, explosives, and a relentless enemy that refused to flee. What should have been a swift campaign turned into something else entirely. The humans didn't just resist. They adapted. Within days, human forces shifted tactics, exploiting every weakness in the Zalzar war machine. They moved unpredictably, striking at supply lines, targeting commanders, disrupting operations with ruthless efficiency. Civilians joined the fight, turning occupied cities into death traps. The Zalzar, so used to absolute control, found themselves in unfamiliar territory, fighting an enemy that refused to break. A squad of Zalzar shock troopers patrolled a once bustling metropolis, now reduced to rubble. They moved cautiously, weapons ready, sensors scanning for threats. The city should have been under their control. Yet every step felt like stepping into a trap. Then the first explosion hit. A buried charge detonated beneath their feet, sending bodies flying. Before the survivors could react, gunfire erupted from the ruins. The humans were relentless, attacking from multiple directions, moving faster than Zalzar sensors could track. Within minutes, the squad was gone. Another patrol lost. Another lesson learned too late. Reports flooded the Dominion's high command. The humans were not fighting like any species before them. There were no clear battle lines, no predictable strategies. They fought with a level of cunning and brutality the Zalzar had never encountered. Captured officers brought before human interrogators expected cruelty, expected the brutality they had inflicted upon countless other species. Instead, they were met with something worse: calm efficiency. Humans didn't waste time with torture. They extracted information, adapted, and used it against their enemy. The Zalzar's own strategies were being turned against them. A single phrase spoken by a human soldier over intercepted communications sent a chill through Zalzar commanders. We're just getting started. The Dominion had underestimated them. That was their first mistake. Their second was assuming humanity would fight with honor. Nothing was off limits. They targeted supply chains, sabotaged transport ships, even launched suicide attacks on command centers. A Zalzar fleet stationed on the moon was destroyed not by human warships, but by repurposed mining drones turned into guided missiles. The humans didn't care about acceptable tactics. They cared about survival. What began as an invasion turned into a war of attrition. The Zalzar had numbers, firepower, technology. But humans had something far more dangerous: the ability to learn, to adapt, to strike back harder every time they were hit. Zalzar soldiers, once arrogant conquerors, now moved in fear. Every street could be a trap. Every abandoned vehicle could be rigged to explode. Every civilian could be a soldier in disguise. Sleep became rare, paranoia constant. Then came the moment that changed everything. A human strike team, using stolen Zalzar technology, infiltrated a Dominion command post. They bypassed security, eliminated key officers, and left a single message scrawled in Zalzar blood across the walls. Wrong species. The Dominion, for the first time in its history, hesitated. The war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. The Zalzar, once certain of victory, now faced the unthinkable. They were losing. The humans had done more than resist. They had adapted, turned the tide, and now they were coming for the Dominion itself. Captured Zalzar officers spoke of a relentless enemy, one that refused to fight on conventional terms. Entire fleets had been crippled not by superior technology, but by sheer ingenuity. They had watched their dreadnoughts fall to human-made cyber warfare, their supply lines collapse under relentless sabotage. What should have been a swift campaign had turned into a nightmare. And now the humans were taking the fight beyond Earth. The first counterattack was not a large-scale invasion, not an organized fleet assault. It was precise, brutal, and designed to send a message. Human strike teams, using stolen Dominion ships, infiltrated Zalzar-controlled worlds. They struck at fuel depots, weapons facilities, communication hubs. By the time the Dominion realized what was happening, dozens of strategic locations had been wiped off the map. Zalzar forces scrambled to regroup, to regain control, but the humans never struck the same place twice. They moved unpredictably, their attacks coordinated yet chaotic. Dominion commanders found themselves in the unfamiliar position of being outmaneuvered at every turn. The species they had dismissed as inferior had now turned into their greatest threat. Panic spread through the ranks. Troops stationed on occupied worlds reported entire regiments going missing. Zalzar officers abandoned their posts, fearing assassinations. Civilians, once loyal to the Dominion, now whispered of the humans as something more than soldiers. They had become legends, ghosts in the dark, striking without warning and disappearing just as quickly. Then came the moment that shattered the last remnants of Zalzar confidence. A Dominion fleet, regrouping in deep space, received a transmission on all channels. The voice was unmistakably human, calm, measured. "We are not the ones retreating. You are." At that moment, the Zalzar understood humanity was no longer defending. They were hunting. The Dominion scrambled to reinforce their defenses, but it was too late. The humans had already figured out how to disable Zalzar shielding technology, rendering their warships vulnerable. What had once been the ultimate defense was now nothing more than a flawed system waiting to be exploited. When the first Zalzar capital world fell, it happened so quickly that High Command refused to believe the reports. Entire planetary defenses had been bypassed. Human forces had landed without resistance, their tactics honed to perfection. The once mighty garrisons of the Dominion surrendered within days. Zalzar leadership, desperate for answers, demanded an explanation. How had this happened? How had a single species done what no other had? The answer was simple. The humans had never fought to win a battle. They had fought to win the war. And now it was no longer a war. It was extermination. The Zalzar Dominion had ruled for centuries, their conquests spanning countless star systems. Now their empire was crumbling. The war they had started was no longer about domination, it was about survival. And they were the ones running. Human forces, once scattered and desperate, had become the apex predators of the battlefield. Every lesson learned, every tactic refined, had turned them into something the Zalzar could not contain. They didn't fight for territory. They fought for vengeance. Entire Dominion fleets went dark, their communications severed before they could send distress signals. Planets once considered strongholds fell in days, their defenses bypassed with surgical precision. Zalzar warriors, bred for conquest, now found themselves outmatched at every turn. Their weapons were turned against them, their strategies anticipated and countered before they could even act. The humans struck without mercy. There were no negotiations, no demands for surrender. Every Dominion-controlled world they took was left in ruins, its infrastructure obliterated, its leadership erased. They did not occupy. They did not conquer. They destroyed. Zalzar commanders, once arrogant and unchallenged, now operated in secrecy, hiding from an enemy that never stopped hunting. Even those who attempted to flee found no refuge. The humans pursued them across the stars, tracking their movements with a relentless efficiency that left no room for escape. The Dominion's homeworld, once the center of power for an empire, now stood defenseless. Its planetary defenses, designed to repel armadas, were useless against the tactics humanity had perfected. The invasion came swiftly, not as a siege, but as an execution. Human forces descended upon the capital, targeting every remaining symbol of Dominion control. The ruling council, the architects of the war, made one final plea for surrender. They offered peace, offered to leave humanity alone, to withdraw from every occupied world. But humanity had already made its decision. The war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with silence. The Zalzar Dominion ceased to exist, its fleets reduced to wreckage, its worlds abandoned, its people scattered. Humanity, once seen as weak, had proven itself in the only way the galaxy would understand. They had not just won. They had ensured that no one would ever think of waging war against them again.